behind her neck and held her for a few seconds. It was nice. The two of us had shared a lot of pain and misery in a short time. We had also been in a life-threatening situation. "Alex, as always, an honor," she said as she pulled away. "Thanks for the Krispy Kremes and everything else." "Keep in touch," I said. "Will you, Jamila?" "Absolutely, I plan to. You can count on it. I mean that, Alex." Then Inspector Jamila Hughes turned away and walked inside the bustling terminal at New Orleans International. I was definitely going to miss her. I already thought of her as a friend. I watched her go, then headed back to the FBI offices in New Orleans to bury my head in some work. I went over everything we had with Kyle. Then we went over everything again, just to be sure it was as fucked up as we thought it was. The two of us agreed that there weren't even any good theories about what had happened to Daniel and Charles. We just didn't know. No one was talking so far. Or maybe no one had seen anything. Whoever killed them wanted to show us that they were superior. To them, to us, physically, mentally, in terms of their ruthlessness, I said. But I wasn't really sure about that. I was just thinking out loud. "I don't think it was an accident that the whole thing feels a little like a magic trick," Kyle said. "Doesn't that strike you, Alex? Some connection to magic?" "Yeah, but it wasn't a magic trick. Daniel and Charles are dead, and so are a lot of other people, going back a lot of years. We're nowhere, is that what you're saying?" "Yeah, and I don't like it here," I said. Chapter 76. I worked late that night in the FBI office. So what else was new? Around 9, I was feeling lonely and edgy, all messed up. I had called home, but nobody was there. That worried me a little, until I remembered that it was my Aunt Tia's birthday, and Nana was throwing a party at Tia's new house in Chapelgate, north of Baltimore. I hadn't bought Tia a present. Damn it. Damn me. Ever since I'd come to Washington as a kid, Tia had never forgotten my birthday. Not once. This year, she had given me the watch that I was wearing now. I called her house in Maryland, and I got to talk to most of my relatives. They teased that I was missing out on some great socket tume cake. They wanted to know where I was and when I was coming home. I didn't have a satisfactory answer to give them. "Soon as I can. I miss you all. You have no idea how much I miss being there." I decided I needed to stop in at the magician's house before I went back to the Dauphine. Why did I need to do that? I wondered. Because I was wired. Because I am obsessive. A couple of New Orleans policemen were stationed out front. They looked bored and underutilized, and definitely not obsessive. I showed them ID, then I was let inside. "No problem, Detective Cross." I really wasn't sure why, but I had a vague feeling that we had missed something in the house. Forensics had spent hours going over the place. So had I. We hadn't found anything concrete. Still, I didn't like being in the old house again. The domain. Maybe I needed a gree-gree for protection. I walked through the overdone, very ornate foyer and living room. My footsteps made the big house sound empty. I kept wondering, what were we missing? What was I missing? The master bedroom was situated off the hall at the top of the stairs. Nothing had changed since the first time I was in there. Why in hell had I bothered to come back? The large open room was filled with dark modern art. Some of it hung, but several paintings were propped up against the walls. The magician slept in a bed, not in the coffins we'd found below in the tunnels. As I was searching through their closet again, I came across something I hadn't seen before. I was sure it hadn't been there when I examined the bedroom earlier. Lying among the shoes were effigies of Daniel and Charles. Miniature dolls of the magicians. There were slash marks across the throats, chests, and faces, just like the way they had been murdered. Where the hell had the gruesome effigies come from? What did they mean? What was going on down here in New Orleans? Who had gotten into this house after we sealed it? I was tempted to call Kyle, but I held off. I wasn't sure why. I didn't want to go back down into the tunnels alone and at night, but I was here, and I figured I ought to take another quick look around. There were 2 cops posted right outside the door, right? What were we missing? Unspeakably violent murders went back at least 11 years. Our 2 best suspects had been murdered. Someone had put effigies in their bedroom. I went down to the cellar, then into the tunnels that spidered out in several directions from the main area. New Orleans is about 8 feet below sea level, and the cellar and tunnels were probably always damp. The walls sweat. I heard a scraping noise and stopped. Something was walking around. I reached into my shoulder holster, took out my Glock. I listened closely. Nothing. Then more scraping. Mice or rats, I thought. Probably all it is. Probably. Almost definitely. I had to go and look further, though. That was my problem, wasn't it? I had to go look. Had to investigate. Couldn't just walk away. What was I trying to prove to myself? That I had no fears? That I wasn't like my father, who had quit on just about everything in life, including his kids and himself? I inched forward slowly and quietly, and I listened to the house. I could hear water dripping somewhere in the dank tunnels. I used my old Zippo to light a few torches hung on the tunnel walls. There were really bad images in my head. The bite wounds on the bodies I'd seen. The way Daniel and Charles had been attacked. The poisonous bites I'd suffered in Charlotte. You're one of us now. The anger, the rage connected to the murders were present in so many cities. What were the killers angry about? Where were they right now? I never heard them coming. Never saw a movement. I was hit, twice. The attackers had come swiftly out of the darkness. One went for my head and neck, the other hit around my knees. They were a team, efficient. I went down hard, and it took the wind right out of me. But I fell on the attacker who was wrapped around my legs. I heard a loud crack, maybe a bone breaking. Then a scream. He let me go. I got up, but the second assailant was attached to my back. He bit me. Oh, Jesus, no! I cursed and slammed him into the wall. I did it again. Who the hell were these fantastic madmen? Who was the leech riding my back? He finally let go, the son of a bitch. I spun around at him. I clipped the side of his head with my gun. I hit him again with a solid left hook. He went down like a sack. I was breathing hard, still full of fight, though. Neither of the assailants was moving much now. I kept the gun on them, while I lit another candle on the wall. That was better. Light always helps. I saw a male and female, probably no more than 16 or 17. Their eyes were like dark holes. The male must have been 6'6" or more. He had on a dingy white t-shirt with Marlboro Racing First to Finish printed on it, and baggy, scungy black jeans. The girl was around 5'2", with wide hips, wide everything. Her black hair was stringy and greasy, with reddish highlights. I touched my neck and was surprised that the skin wasn't broken. There was no blood on my hand. "You're under arrest," I yelled at the 2 of them. "You goddamn bloodsuckers." Chapter 77. Vampires? If that's what these twisted creeps were. Assassins? Murderers? Their names were Ann Elo and John Jack Masterson, and they had attended Catholic high school in Baton Rouge until about 6 months ago, when they had dropped out and run away from home. Each was 17 years old. They were just kids. I spent 3 hours attempting to question the suspects that night, then another 4 hours the following morning. Elo and Masterson wouldn't talk to me or anyone else. Not a word. They wouldn't say what they were doing inside the mansion in the Garden District, why they had attacked me, whether or not they had placed the sinister effigies in the closet of the dead men. The teen simply glared across the plain wooden table in one or another of the interrogation rooms at police headquarters. The parents were notified and brought in, but Elo and Masterson wouldn't speak to them either. At one point, Ann Elo finally addressed her father with 2 words. "Blow me." I wondered how the cult of the vampires had satisfied her needs, her incredible anger. In the meantime, there were lots of others from the fetish ball to talk to. The commonality among most of them was that they held straight jobs in New Orleans. They were bartenders and waitresses, hotel desk clerks, computer analysts, actors, and even teachers. Most were afraid to have their alternative lifestyle come out at work, so they eventually talked to us. Unfortunately, no one told us anything revealing about Daniel and Charles, or their murderers. It was an extraordinarily busy night at the precinct house. More than 24 homicide detectives and FBI agents conducted re-interviews. We exchanged notes and bios with highlighted inconsistencies. We went hard at the most obvious liars in the group. We also kept a list of the witnesses who seemed most likely to break under pressure. We switched interviewers on them, sent them to their cells, then summoned them back before they could sleep. We doubled up on them. "All we need is a few rubber hoses," one of the New Orleans detectives said while we were waiting for Ann Elo to be fetched from her cell for the 6th time that night. His name was Mitchell Sams, and he was around 50, a black man, hugely overweight, tough, effective, cynical as hell. When Ann Elo was brought back into the interrogation room, she looked like a sleepwalker, or a zombie. Her eye sockets were incredibly deep and dark. Her lips were chapped and caked with dried blood. Sams went at her. "Good morning, Glory. It's nice to see your pasty white face again. You look like total shit, babe. I'm being kind. Several of your friends, including your pathetic boyfriend, have broken down already tonight." The girl turned her vacant eyes toward a brick wall. "You must be mistaking me for somebody who gives a shit," she said. I decided to try an idea that had been weaving through my mind for the past hour or so. I had used it on a few of the others. "We know about the new sire," I told Ann Elo. "He's gone back to California. He isn't here for you. He can't help you or hurt you." Her face remained blank and unresponsive, but she folded her arms. She sagged a few inches in her chair. Her lips were bleeding again, possibly because she'd bitten into them. "Who gives a shit? Not me." Just then, a bleary-eyed NOPD detective hurried into the interrogation room where Mitchell Sams and I were working on Elo. The detective had dark sweat stains under both arms of his pale blue sport shirt. Heavy stubble covered his chin and cheeks. He looked about as exhausted as I felt. "There's been another murder," he told Sams. "Another hanging murder." Ann Elo slowly, rhythmically clapped her hands. "That's great," she said. Chapter 78. I drove to the crime scene alone, feeling increasingly more distant and unreal. The wheels in my head were turning slowly and methodically. Where did we go from here? I had no goddamn idea. Jesus, I was beat. The house was an outbuilding for one of the Garden District's historic homes, a small carriage house with a second-story balcony. It looked like it could have been a cute, cozy B&B. Magnolia and banana trees surrounded it on the outside. So did an intricate, wrought iron fence, the kind I had seen everywhere in the French Quarter. About half of the New Orleans Police Department was already at the scene. So were a couple of EMS trucks, their roof lights spinning and blazing. The press was beginning to arrive as we did, the late shift. Detective Sams had gotten to the murder scene a couple of minutes before I did. He met me in the hallway outside the upstairs bedroom where the killing had taken place. The interior of the place had fine detailing on almost every surface. Ceilings, banisters, moldings, doors. The owner had cared about the house and also about Mardi Gras. Feathers and beads, colorful masks and costumes were tacked up on most of the walls. "This is bad, even worse than we thought," Sam said. "She's a detective named Maureen Cook. She's in Vice, but she was helping out on Daniel and Charles. Most of the department is pitching in." Sams led me into the detective's bedroom. It was small but attractive, with a sky-blue ceiling. Someone had once told me that color was supposed to keep winged insects from nesting there. Maureen Cook was a redhead, tall and thin, probably in her early 30s. She had been hung by her bare feet from a chandelier. Her nails were painted red. The detective was naked except for a delicate silver bracelet on her wrist. Blood streaks were all over her body, but there was no sign of blood pooling on the floor or anywhere else. I walked up close to her. "Sad," I whispered under my breath. "A human life gone. Just like that. Another detective dead." I looked at Mitchell Sams. He was waiting for me to talk first. This might not have been done by the same killers, I said, and shook my head. The bite wounds looked